Em 1942, o mundo estava em guerra. Era a Segunda Guerra Mundial. Pearl Harbor havia sido atacada há pouco pelos japoneses. Mas a cidade de Los Angeles foi palco de um evento incrível. Um objeto voador não identificado pairou sobre a cidade. Milhares de projéteis foram disparados contra esse objeto. Parece que nada o afetou. E mais, nativos norte-americanos falam em sua cultura sobre o Povo das Estrelas, um povo que teria vindo do espaço para ajudar na evolução dos nativos, dos humanos. Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, boa madrugada, aonde você estiver. Eu sou THIAGO LUIZ TICCHETTI. Sejam bem-vindos ao canal Desvendando Mistérios. E o meu entrevistado de hoje é o pesquisador também da MUFON, meu colega, Jeff Krause. Jeff Krause é ufólogo há muitos anos, grande parte da sua vida. Sendo ex-diretor estadual da MUFON para o sul da Califórnia, é o atual diretor estadual da MUFON Tri-County. Ele investigou muitos casos. Os mais interessantes seriam o St. Louis Obispo UFO e o Encounter at Edwards, casos onde há o envolvimento de militares na perseguição e detectação de objetos voadores não identificados. O atual projeto de Jeff envolve pesquisas sobre a cultura nativa americana Chumash e sua interação com o Povo das Estrelas, um tema que parece ser replicado em todo o mundo durante muitas das eras antigas. Mas antes de seguirmos com a entrevista com Jeff, não se esqueça de se inscrever no canal. Marque também o sininho, para sempre que tiver um vídeo novo, você ser avisado. Dê um like nos mais de 400 vídeos do canal. Comente também, eu quero saber a sua opinião. E é claro, compartilhe o vídeo, compartilhe o canal. Vamos atrair mais pessoas para esse tema fascinante, que é a ufologia. Vamos então para mais uma entrevista inédita e exclusiva aqui no seu canal Desvendando Mistérios. Hi Jeff, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here on my YouTube channel. Thank you for your time. And as I said, we are friends from MUFON and as well MUFON field researcher. And I'm pretty sure that my audience is going to love it because you're going to bring us cases from the state of California with many aspects of the phenomenon. And there's interesting cases that happen in California, and we're going to talk about it.
Quite a few, actually. California is kind of the UFO hotspot in the world, especially Southern California. But are there any recent cases you had in mind that you'd like to hear about, or would you like me to just start rattling off some information for you?
Well, we're going to start with the same question that I make to everybody. What take you to ufology research?
Well, at an early age, I was kind of informed that Roswell really happened by my aunt and uncle who lived in New Mexico there. But not only that, I had a few sightings of my own. And so that, of course, piqued my interest, and I wanted to start doing research on it after seeing that. So it wasn't until 2014 that I actually joined MUFON. Up until then, I was doing research on my own. But since 2014, I've been actually investigating UFO cases directly for MUFON. And we've had quite a few fascinating cases. Actually, we just had, in the last month in August, there was 897 cases reported worldwide to MUFON, and I believe 630 some odd of those cases were just in California alone. So we do get the lion's share of the cases each month.
That's amazing. And you said that you had your own sightings. Can you tell us? Because I had one, just one, and that, as far as I know, there's not a lot of ufologists that had a sighting. So I think we are lucky guys. Can you tell us what you saw?
Well, absolutely. We are the small minority. Not everyone is fortunate enough to see UFOs. I've had actually a few experiences in my life. Probably the most memorable one would be, though, a really big one that I saw in the summer of 1979 down in Azusa, California. I was coming out of a market around 8:30 in the evening and happened to catch something in my peripheral vision out of the corner of my eye. And when I looked up, I was astounded because there was a huge craft not making any sound. It was rectangular in shape, roughly. Probably, I would estimate maybe a mile in length and at least a half mile in width, maybe more. It was only going maybe 25 to 30 miles an hour overhead, which I thought was pretty astounding because there was no sign of any means of propulsion whatsoever. And all of a sudden, it took off, leaving like a streak of light that kind of sucked into itself into a pinpoint and then shot off up into space. So I knew right then that was, something we don't have, at least nothing that I was aware of at the time. And I'm still not aware that we have anything that would match the performance of what I saw there. And of course, you see something like that, and there was maybe 100 other people, 200 other people at least in the vicinity, in the parking lot of the market. People were whistling and making cat calls like from a concert. They were, sounded happy, not scared. So I know these people saw it as well. And I remember making a comment to the person who was with me. This is too big to be ignored. We're going to hear all about this in the news in the morning. And the next day, of course, there was not a thing about it in the newspaper or the news or anything like that. And this was in a major metropolitan area, the San Gabriel Valley, which is just a little bit east of LA. So, for there not to be anyone even mentioning it was, par for the course back in 1979. Back then, people really didn't talk about it. And it took many years before I was able to talk about it freely and, discuss it with people without a certain amount of ridicule.
Oh, that's happened. That's happened a lot. I know California. I know just LA. I've been there in 2018, and you spoke earlier that California is a hot spot. Where
The,
are the places, the most hot spots in the states of California?
let me retract my statement earlier because I'm looking at the notes now. I was right about the 697 for the United States. That's how many cases we're in. It was 800 and something for the world. But California alone had 75 sightings in the state just last month. Of those reports, not everyone is actually an unknown. I'm sure you know that roughly about 5% of the reports that come in are easily identifiable. They're simply, things that people don't understand what they're seeing. It's that 5% of cases that really holds my interest and keeps me investigating. In fact, if you want, I can give you some of the figures on exactly what it was that was seen.
Yes,
Now,
please.
okay, the shapes of the objects that were seen, we had 154 that were circular shaped, 109 that were spherical, 55 that people really couldn't say what the shape was. They just classified it as unknown. And we had 54 that were other, but then 54 also that were oval. 52 triangles were reported. 48 discs. Now keep in mind, this is just all last month in the United States. We had 45 that were star-like, 36 cylinders, 25 Tic Tacs. Tic Tacs have become really popular lately since the videos have been released of the Tic Tac over the ocean and Nimitz encounter and stuff. So now people are starting to notice them a lot more and report them when they see them. They're not ignored as much as they probably were in the past. We had 24 square and rectangular shaped ones, 21 cigars, 13 diamonds, 12 fireballs, 7 bullets or missiles, 7 teardrops, 6 flashes, 6 cones, 5 Saturn-like, 5 chevron-shaped, 5 blimps, 4 boomerang-shaped, and 4 egg-shaped. Now, out of those, 97 of those sightings were less than 100 feet from the witness. 93 of them were between 101 to 500 feet. Then we had 149 sightings that were about 501 foot to a mile. Now, when you don't know the size of an object, it's pretty hard to estimate the distance of it, but in a lot of cases, they get pretty close and they're pretty good with their estimates. We had 168 that were over a mile, 96 where they just didn't have a clue what the distance was, which is probably a pretty honest, sighting. If you don't know, it's better to say you don't know than to make an inaccurate guess. And then we had 19 that had no value for distance whatsoever. So those are, pretty fascinating statistics. There's a lot of things that people are seeing, a lot that's going on in our sky these days.
Yes, it is. And in California, what were the best hotspots? Los Angeles, near the beach, countryside of the state. If you want to see a UFO, let's say, where's the best place to go?
Well, expecting to see one is never the way to actually see one. Most people aren't actually looking for one when they see a real UFO. However, there have been a lot of reports around different military installations, nuclear plants. Vandenberg Space Force Base had a few really good sightings. In fact, one of them was just mentioned in the congressional hearings a couple weeks ago. Edwards Air Force Base has had some fascinating sightings. I had a really extraordinarily fascinating case there involving security personnel that actually lost time on their patrol. So, yeah, I'd say probably they're interested in the same things we're interested in. Areas where there might be technology, commerce, things of interest to them like missile launches or rocket launches, things like that, to monitor what we're doing probably would be my most likely guess on it.
Yeah, and you spoke about the encounter at Edwards. We're gonna talk about it, but before it, there was one of the most incredible UFO cases ever recorded, including photos. It was the Battle of Los Angeles. Battle
Yes,
of
sir.
LA that became a movie, but it's nothing to do with the reality. Can you tell us more about this case, and do you think that was real, that a UFO was over Los Angeles back in
Absolutely.
1946, if I'm not wrong?
I've actually, a couple years ago, I actually ran across a witness who was 7 years old at the time when she sighted what I think was the first appearance of the craft before the sightings that night. She lived in Santa Barbara, and her family was military personnel. And this huge craft came from the ocean over towards her house and made this huge shadow over the house. She remembers the people, her grown-up relatives, getting very upset by it and later telling her not to talk about it, that people might take her away if she talked about it. But as she grew up, she knew that now, after seeing things on TV and in older age, that it's okay to speak about these things. And her daughter, I believe, talked her into filing the report with MUFON. And I actually got to interview her and put it on video. But I believe that this craft was the first sighting of it when it came on. Now, everyone was alerted because a few days prior, actually a few hours prior, the Japanese had shelled oil refinery in Santa Barbara. And they didn't really do too much damage, but everyone had nerves because of it. And so the air wardens were monitoring the skies, and there was actually teams out with the Klieg lights doing searches and looking out for aircraft at the time. So when this object did appear over Culver City late in the morning hours, they were, already nervous as it was, and they started firing off rounds at it. And I believe something like over 1,200 rounds were fired at it, and nothing ever hit it. You have plenty of photos of the Klieg lights coming together and a shape being defined when the beams came together that appears to be an obvious saucer shape. Eyewitnesses at the time said that they saw a saucer shape that flew over the mountain range and headed towards the ocean. I believe this to be a pretty credible sighting, mainly because, one, there's a photo, two, there's a lot of witnesses. There was many things fired up in the air and nothing affected it. If it had been anything, a balloon, an airplane, anything that we know, the barrage that was sent at it would have definitely brought it down. But it seemed to, take its time and not be bothered by anything, and then just casually leave the area and head off over the ocean and on down south. There are reports that it possibly might have been shot down, but yet we have no confirmation of that. There was no wreckage and no actual witness sighting of anyone shooting it down that I'm aware of. But it was and still remains a pretty viable sighting. A lot of different arguments against it. Of course, it was heavily denied by the Air Force and the Army. But witness testimony, photographic evidence would suggest otherwise. And so I count it as one of the more viable sightings of the 20th century.
And I agree with you. And you investigate two of spectacular cases: the San Luis Obispo UFO and the encounter at the Edwards. Let's start. I want you to tell us both of them. Let's start with the San Luis Obispo UFO. What was that?
Okay, well, I live in San Luis Obispo. So, I was bored one day and just wanted to investigate. I decided to do a search and see if there was any sightings in the area. And I was surprised when I found a photograph that's all it said was July 7th, 1967, San Luis Obispo, California. And it was a magnificent photo of a disc next to a mountain, but that was all the information with it. Well, I kept searching and I found probably a couple hundred instances of it on different sites. Nobody claiming responsibility for taking the picture. And I didn't find any more information about it until all of a sudden I came across a copy of the photo that was unclassified from Right Pat. And so that clued me in that it was associated with the Project Blue Book case, most likely. And I did a few searches and ended up finding out that it was part of a Project Blue Book case. So I wrote some Freedom of Information requests to different agencies, got back some very interesting responses from them, not the usual responses you get from these agencies, mainly because I was able to nail down the location, it being Bishop Peak. I knew the date, and of course there was the photo, which speaks for itself. So it was pretty hard for them to deny it after that fact. And I actually did end up getting confirmation. I have a file number at the National Archive, which is supposedly going to hold the information from the Project Blue Book case on this incident. I've yet to make it to the archive, but it's on my to-do list to get the rest of the information for the book I'm writing on the whole sighting. But it's just one of many fascinating sightings here in the San Luis Obispo area, a few of which I've had myself. My son and I, a few months ago, saw a disc very similar to the one in that photo of the slow UFO, traveling very slowly along the mountain ridge, headed off in the direction towards Edwards Air Force Base, of all places. but just taking its time until it disappeared in the distance. So yeah, this is a pretty good area for seeing things. I think we have a lot of traffic through here, and I've had reports of some pretty fascinating sightings from people directly in this area. Not as many as the LA or Southern California area gets, but some of the ones I've had here have been really fascinating.
Yeah, so we can say that San Luis Obispo is something like the Hudson Valley in New York. There's a weird place with a lot of sightings.
I wouldn't say it's quite that busy. In fact, it's not anywhere near as busy as Hudson Valley. But for a quiet little town, we don't do too bad.
Yeah. And what about the encounter at Edwards? Is Edwards Air Force Base?
Correct. That was one of the more intriguing cases I investigated. It was a few years ago. And of course, the people involved wanted to remain anonymous because they didn't want to lose their military pension. And I totally respect that. And, you know, security clearances and things are kept that way for a reason. There's a lot of information we don't want the wrong parties to get a hold of. So I always value security clearances. And when people sign NDAs and things like that, you have to respect them. But these gentlemen were on security patrol. They were both security patrol for for Edwards Air Force Base. They were in a Jeep patrolling the perimeter of the base, which is out in the desert. And when they came around a corner, they saw about a 30-foot diameter craft hovering directly over one of the buildings for the rocket laboratories. And as they watched it, it slowly rose up and moved directly over them. Now, to the best of their recollection, it hovered over them for just a couple minutes. When it got over them, their radio quit working. Their Jeep stopped, the lights went out, and they were a little nervous, but they watched it, and they think it was only over them for a couple minutes, and then it took off. However, and this is the really fascinating part, after it left, when their radio came on again, they learned that everyone on base had been searching for them for 2 hours. And as far as they were aware, it had only been a couple minutes. But their watches confirmed the time had passed. And when they got back onto the base, they were questioned. They had some people in the room that they weren't aware were military personnel. I guess they were in suits and were rather formal about everything, not doing a lot of talking, just staying in the back of the room, listening to everything. But they were fully debriefed and made to sign disclosures that what they saw was a helicopter, which of course, no way in hell that's what they saw. But that's what they were made to sign an agreement on. And still to this day, they aren't allowed to talk about what it was that they saw. And the gentleman that I interviewed really had no idea the significance of the time that was missing. But I'm pretty sure that, you know, if it was 2 hours of time, any number of things might have possibly happened to these gentlemen during that time, including possibility that they might have been abducted during that time. That's speculation, of course, but it's pretty hard to imagine 2 hours going by without something happening to them in that time period. So that remains one of the fascinating cases, especially since, you know, you would figure that something as big as a 30-foot diameter UFO over a major installation on a secure military base would have maybe been seen by a few people and might have caused a little bit of a stir. But apparently that either wasn't the case or the information of what went on is heavily classified and not being revealed. Yet to determine which is the case on that one.
Once we're talking about military and Air Force bases, let's go to this way. How do you see today the pressure that the U.S. government and the military has been suffering from the politicians for disclosure? Do you think that more people like David Grush, Captain Robert Salas, will come forward to tell us their experiences with the UFO phenomenon, or we just stay in the same path that we have for decades?
Yes, well, Bob Salas is a good friend of mine, and he testified before any of this to Congress, and pretty much they ignored everything. I think it's amusing that both in the NASA hearings and these recent congressional hearings, nobody was aware of the Malmstrom incident in 1967, where 10 nuclear missiles were shot down by a UFO hovering over the control capsule for the firing line. And Colonel Salas was in the capsule at the time. He was the person in charge of that fire capsule at the moment. None of this information was brought up in the current hearings, and that goes to show how compartmentalized information is, because many people are able to say under oath that they never heard of this information, and they're truthful about it because the details of the information was never revealed to them. They didn't have a need to know. I think a lot of the ways that these have been handled is going to change as a result of the congressional hearings. I'm not sure how or how much, but I think everyone should be aware that, yes, you've heard of a secret government program that investigates UFOs. I'm just pretty sure you haven't heard of the secret program that investigates UFOs.
Yeah, we heard it. We heard here in Brazil. We don't have a lot of information from United States here, but we trying to get all the information to share here in Brazil. And but do you think that if we are leaving finally a disclosure, this disclosure is gonna be from now on, or it's gonna cover the past as well, like Roswell, like a lot of cases? What do you think?
I think disclosure's been going on for about 15 years, 20 years now, in a slow drip fashion, in the form of different shows like Ancient Aliens, Unsolved Mysteries. It's been a slow drip to get the American public and the rest of the world accustomed to the idea, rather than just springing it on them. There's not going to be, I don't believe, a major announcement by some talking head on a podium telling us that there's a reality of aliens and UFOs. I think it's going to be a slow drip of information. Now, let's keep in mind, the Pentagon, the military, the government, they haven't been releasing this information. This stuff was leaked. They're having to react to leaked information. And the way it was done is so well, with witnesses that can't be, anything said against them, really. And so they're kind of in a bind. They have to admit that, yes, okay, some of that stuff's real. And then they're able to take the posture that we don't know what it is. We don't know anything about it. And they're able to play dumb because of the way security clearances have compartmentalized the information. Different aspects of it have been pawned off to corporations and defense contractors and things like that, to where you can't write a freedom of information request on them. They're a private corporation. Freedom of information request is only good for your government. So if they shuffle the evidence off elsewhere, well, they're pretty clean from any inquiry going too far, unless you can follow the trail and find out where it is that everything went and then backtrack from there. So, yeah, there's a lot of work that has to be done before these things are verified. I'm really amazed at the information that's coming forward from shows like the Search for the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, where actual scientific data is being collected. But not only that, the scientific data that's being collected is being openly shared with the public. And, this is kind of groundbreaking. I come from a generation when you didn't talk about UFOs, and all of a sudden here we are in this day and age, watching scientific teams with credibility getting data from what they now have rebranded as UAPs. I still like to call them flying saucers, but they're getting credible data from this. And you can't ignore credible data. That's what science is. It's getting the data and analyzing what it is and what it means. A lot of this you cannot reproduce in a laboratory. So, yeah, that kind of defeats the scientific method in a lot of ways. But you gain a lot of information that you can record from each of these sightings, and you still cannot ever discount witness testimony.
You mentioned about the Skywalker Range. Do you really think that something like ufological happened there in that range? Because we have here in Brazil, we watch here in Brazil the show. But many ufologists don't think that's real, just like, well, it's so fantastic. So what do you think?
There's something going on. I mean, that is undeniable. There's video evidence of it. They got all kinds of scientific data that they've recorded, from radio frequency waves, FLIR data, actual video, UDAP information that they've been collecting. So, that data cannot be discounted because they've been able to collect it. Some of the stories on the history of Skinwalker Ranch were not accurate. There's a very good book by, what's his name? Give me a second here. Dr. Frank, his last name, the name of the book is The Utah UFO Displays. Frank Salisbury, that's it, Dr. Frank Salisbury. Very good book on the early history of Skinwalker Ranch, going back to the owners in 1933, and many of the sightings that were investigated in the Uinta Basin by Junior Hicks, with a lot of credible witnesses. And again, a lot of scientific data for the time was collected then. So sightings of things had been going on in the Uinta Basin for a while. And of course, Native Americans talk about things that have happened in that area all through their history. But again, what they've got poking the hornet's nest, I'm sure a lot of ufologists around the world will agree that the phenomena reacts differently to different people, and it can react differently to different stimuli. And a lot of times, you can pretty much swear that if you see it, it's because it wanted you to see it. Whatever was on display, they obviously wanted you to see it. And I wholeheartedly believe that. If they didn't want you to see it, you would not. There's many, many cases where witnesses clearly saw something, and yet people right next to them, near them, or in other areas that should have had clear views of the same objects didn't see a darn thing. Plenty of reports of cloaking and masking and things like that. So I don't discount any sightings that someone says they saw it and someone else didn't see a thing, or maybe the description of what they saw is a little different, because the phenomena can affect people differently. But as far as what's been going on at Skinwalker Ranch, there has been a lot of things going on there besides just the UAP phenomena. And there's a lot more at work in that particular area, I think, that might have answers to UAP questions, but it might also have answers to a lot of other questions in physics that we've been just recently starting to understand. It's like the possibility of wormholes. Is there one there? I saw video evidence that would suggest the very tangible possibility that there is a wormhole there. So, it remains to be seen. I think we're going to learn a lot of valuable information from that area, if nothing else. We may not get the answer, but I think we're certainly going to get a lot of really new, great questions.
Yeah, you just said what I'm gonna ask now.
It's because I'm
Why?
psychic.
Yeah, why even with cell phones with camera all over the place? Everybody has a cell phone with camera, and people ask me this question: why we cannot get a perfect UFO photo? You just
I'll
said
tell
it.
you from personal experience.
Okay, let's go.
Last time my son and I saw a really good size triangle shaped UFO when I was bringing him home from work, I did the smart thing. I kept my eye on it. I carefully pulled over into a parking lot on the side of the road. I carefully got out of the van. I grabbed my phone. I set it to video. I started walking towards it and soundly tripped over the bushes on the ground and fell on my face into a bunch of juniper. By the time I got up, it was long gone. I was picking crap out of my sweater. But that's how a lot of these sightings happen. A couple of times I've seen things, didn't even occur to me to grab my phone right off the dash inches from me because I wanted to observe it and get as much information as I could while I was looking at it. I didn't want to take the chance of looking away and having it go. But again, there's field effects to take into account. There's been a lot of photos that people thought would come out really good because they were close, especially in the days of using film in a camera. But yet, because of one field or another, we don't know exactly what it might have been, but something obviously affected the film, making it milky instead of an actual picture. I think some of the really good photos are the ones that were taken on Polaroids because, you know, there's so little to go wrong on that, that really, and you can't mess with it. There's no way to really doctor and edit a Polaroid. It's going to develop and be what it was that you took the picture of. So I think like the Rex Heflin photos in Santa Ana from 1965 are very fascinating photos. They came out really nice and clear. But again, it's pretty hard to take a photo of any object when it's moving and you're trying to get it in your viewfinder and get a good shot of it. That alone, under the best of circumstances, is hard. But if you're, you know, any other adverse things happening at the same time are just going to be detrimental to the quality of the photo, from your finger being over the lens when you try to take it to, you know, maybe the batteries don't work on the camera all of a sudden. You know, any number of things that I've heard of. So the number of really good photos is depressingly small. The number of bad photos is really high, and the number of photos that aren't anything at all is just out of this world.
Yeah, and talking about the raffling photos, for me is one of the best evidence ever. But also, the skepticism about this photo is huge. People don't
Yeah,
believe it.
well, you
Many
know, there's a
people.
lot of haters out there.
Yeah.
There'll be people that, you know, complain about anything.
Yeah, but
I
do you
happen to
believe this
know,
photo is real? The case is real.
yeah, and you know, I happen to know a little bit about photography. I've been certified in Photoshop since 2000, so I'm no stranger to what can be done in digital trickery and things like that. Not only that, though, I know how to look for it. And what's really cool, some of the best cases I've had, I'll tell you, the best video and photos I had was taken by a 12-year-old girl. It took a little girl to have the composure to be calm enough to take good video with her aunt's iPhone. And the beautiful thing about that is it holds what's called EXIF data. It's all the details of the photograph: shutter speed, ISO setting, actually has GPS location a lot of times, the date and the time the photo was taken, and also available is if any monkeying or editing was done to the photo. So it's pretty easy to, you know, tell a good photo from a bad one. Good ones that are really good and clean are just that, really good and clean and have good information on them. And that case that I'm specifically talking about actually had a really good photo of a disc hovering over can't remember it was near Long Beach. The name of the town escapes me at the moment, but it was right over a freeway. And there's great video of this disc, glowing white, slowly moving over the freeway, going behind the corner of a warehouse. And this little girl saying, "Look, Mommy, the spaceship's going behind the building." So I dearly love that case. And I love the video and the photos of it because they had information that backed up the witness testimony, the time, the date, the location, GPS data, all that. So I know that the photos were valid, and I know that the video had to be good because the photos accompanied it from the same camera, same time frame. So I know everything in that case matched up with the witness testimony. And that happens most of the time when there are good photos. You have the information that you can get out of the photo that verifies the witness's story. Also, the other side of that sword, a lot of times you'll find information in there that tells you that the witness's testimony is, well, let's say less than honest.
It's true. It's true. We have a lot of them. And you research as well the unidentified underwater objects. There are a lot of cases in the coast of California. And the theory say that might be have underwater extraterrestrial bases there. What do you think?
The Earth is 70% water. If you're going to have a chance, if you're going to have a base on Earth, that right there, the math says it's a 70% chance it's going to be in the water, right? If you want to be undetected and out of sight, underwater. We have trouble traveling underwater because our technology, we use inertia for everything. We push our way through everything. Their technology is different. They pull space and time towards them and encounter it behind them, fill it back in when they leave. Kind of like if you have a blanket and you set a bowling ball on a blanket and you lower one edge of the blanket and the bowling ball rolls to that area. You raise the corner of the blanket, the bowling ball moves away from there. Well, they're able to maneuver space, time in much the same way like that. So it's pretty fascinating, really. You got to admire it. But that also means that, little things like water, rock, things like that, probably have no resistance to them either. No resistance going through air because they're enveloped in their own field. They've been observed more times than you can count, multiple encounters of them going into water and not even making a splash and moving at incredible speeds underwater there, which again shows that they have to have their own field around them, which is quite possibly the only way you could survive speeds that they do is you'd be inside an environment where you don't even notice any motion at all, most likely. So I also saw, I kind of discounted claims sometimes of people seeing UFOs go into the ground, or they said they saw them come out of the ground. And, with my understanding of physics, that is impossible. I've since learned that my understanding of physics is incomplete because I have seen video of a UAP go into a mesa, come out the side of the mesa hundreds of yards further away, travel a few more 100 yards, and then go into the earth. And this was all tracked on video and other recordings as well, FLIR and radar. So I had to, revisit a lot of old cases where people saw things coming out of ground, stone, things like that you would think are impossible. And recently, my son and I, when I was picking him up from work one night, it was about 9:00 at night, and I saw something go by. It looked at the end of the street. It wasn't very far from us. I'd say it was a quarter mile at the furthest. But what looked like the floor of an office building is the best way I can describe it, with the glass windows. And, a big city like LA or anywhere, maybe you'd see at night into the office building and you could see the desks or chairs or people. That's what this reminded me of, going by extremely low. I would say maybe 10 feet above the telephone wires, and not very far from us, and very close to a hill on the other side of it by the old San Luis Obispo Cemetery, the old cemetery. Now, both my son and I watched this thing go, and we thought, is that an airplane going to crash? Is it lost from the airport? And we knew there's nowhere for it to go. There was houses there and a park, and that was about it, and that big hill, which, by the way, had aircraft beacons at the top of it, so aircraft would avoid it. And this was way below all that. And we saw it go by, and it went kind of behind a building, and that was the end of it. We didn't see any more of it. And what the heck? Where did it go? We never understood what it was or where it went. And to this day, I still don't know what it was. But as far as where it went, I now have to consider the fact that it's not totally out of the realm of possibility that rather than crash or something that we would have expected, maybe the ground didn't interfere with it as much, and maybe it went somewhere through the hill. I have no idea. All I know is we both saw the same thing and expected to hear a crash or see a crash, and there was nothing. It just was gone. So, that right there is a mystery by definition.
It is. We still all UFO. It's not all, but 90% of UFO are also USO, because they come from the sky and dive in the water and get up from the water to the sky.
I think they all have the same capabilities, exact same capabilities. And again, here's this argument that a lot of the skeptics and debunkers are going to tell you that that little craft, why'd it come all the way from the far reaches of space or whatever? And I have to use common sense. The little craft probably didn't. It probably came inside bigger craft. I'm pretty sure that every time you see a small UFO, that small little sucker didn't come all the way from the other side of the universe somewhere, especially since none of them seem to have toilets in them. I mean, come on. You're not going to drive all that way and not have a pit stop somewhere. So obviously, these are more like shuttlecraft, in my opinion. Pretty sure that the larger craft handle the big distances. The little craft handle the excursions around the planetary excursions. That's just human logic. Not alien logic, mind you, but that's human logic.
Yeah, that is. But you also have a researcher the culture of the Chumash Native Americans and their interaction with the star people. And if you look at all the insight civilizations in our planet, they always said we came from the skies, or our fathers came from the skies, or we were built from their people that came from the skies.
And what's fascinating is a lot of the symbols that you see around the world from these cultures that supposedly had no contact or interaction, but yet a lot of these symbols are the same, especially this spiral symbol that you see in a lot of pictographs. I myself went out about 1986, was the first time I went out to these caves in the Los Padres National Forest out by the Stony Creek area. And first time I saw these caves, I was blown away. Paintings inside and pictographs of like the sun, typical Kachina drawings. And then there was these big headed things, kind of like a mushroom type head, like this maybe. And then a couple of big black eyes in the center. And I thought, wow, that's, kind of interesting there. And there was a few of those, and then a couple of other shapes that I thought were odd. They weren't common to what you would consider, or at least I thought at the time, people of the time period would be seeing anything like that. And of course, also mixed in with it, there was your basic deer type drawings and warriors and people with bows and arrows on the wall. And the sun, I guess there was a big sun in this cave as well, which I learned is an important symbol for a lot of the Chumash culture. And they put this particular sun symbol in a lot of their sacred sites. So I think these caves were pretty important. There was like, I think there was like 4 of them all together. It was in a weird V-shaped valley of stone raised up from the floor, the dirt area and the trees, surrounded by heavily oaks. And then the shale part of this valley right here where these caves were, I don't know if they were actually dug out at the time or if there were some kind of volcanic bubbles that occurred naturally, because the area is heavily volcanic. There's a lot of volcanic activity that went on through history in this area. So they could have been naturally formed and then just, they took shelter in them over the years. But I've learned over time that there's a good possibility that these people inhabited this area for at least 60,000 years, according to their oral traditions. And there's an area not too far from here up near Cayucas where I discovered there's used to be 5 villages in this area where a river came down. And they dammed it up. They relocated all the villages and the artifacts and everything, although I'm sure a lot of the artifacts remain there. But it was a main meeting place for a lot of the Chumash and other tribes in this area. 5 different villages in this very small, less than 10-mile area. And it all went underwater when they made this dam, which is now Whale Rock Reservoir. But I have the archaeological survey from that before they did it, which is why I thought, this is probably some place that was really significant in prehistory and important to the Chumash, and might have been a place where perhaps they met with other cultures, not just their own. And perhaps maybe I can, over time, find some more information of their interactions with the star people at this location. Now, getting back to the caves has been impossible since about 1989, because the ranchers that have the right-of-way where the roads go through to get to this area closed off the gates and don't allow people through anymore, because a lot of people were shooting up their property and their signs and leaving trash there and just generally ruining the whole area. So they locked up the gates and quit letting people go through there. I can get through on foot, though. The nearest point, if I park, it's about a 6-mile hike, and then I can get back to these caves. And I was about to do it before the pandemic hit. I had a film crew with me that was ready to go out there, and we were going to document it. Then, of course, the pandemic hit, and so everything got put on hold. But I still, now I have the equipment to go back out there. I have more lightweight cameras and the proper stuff to get me there. So this is probably in the near future when it cools off a little more. I'm not going to head out there when it's 100-degree weather, but when it gets back down in the 60s and 70s, it's highly likely to head back out there.
Well, my friend, to finish our interview, tell us, what are your projects in ufology? What are you going to do and what are you doing now?
Well, right now, I've become a member of Project Match, which we use these units. They're called MADAR units, and we have them positioned around the United States through New Fork and Nightcap. Fran Ridge actually is running the project with the MADAR units. And these units are able to detect anomalies coming into the atmosphere in real time and notify investigators so that we're able to see if we can correlate any reports to these sightings and, get data that we can attribute to these sightings and put it with the reports. So MUFON is working in coordination with them on what's called Project Match. And when good sightings come in through the MADAR units, then we're notified. They send out an email to whichever node is in the area that got the reading, and find an investigator in that area to go ahead and investigate these sightings. So this is a relatively new project, And I'm relatively excited about it. Look forward to seeing what kind of data we can get through that.
Well, I'm pretty sure they're going to have a lot of data. And
oh, yeah.
And I hope you share with us at MUFON and the rest of the world.
Absolutely. That's what we're all about. That's why we do it, to share it with everyone.
Yes, that's it. Jeff, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for being my internet YouTube channel. And we hope we're going to meet soon. Well, I will be in Cincinnati at the MUFON Symposium.
Unfortunately, I won't be there, but hey, I'm sure we'll meet sometime soon. And thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, my friend.
My pleasure.
Foi isso, pessoal. Essa entrevista muito interessante com o Jeff Krause, dos pesquisadores da MUFON. Casos interessantíssimos que vocês viram na Califórnia, Estados Unidos, que eu tenho certeza que muitos de vocês não conheciam. Informações que ele nunca trouxe ao público brasileiro. Então é isso. Espero que vocês continuem gostando do canal. Não se esqueça de se inscrever. Também marcar o sininho para sempre que tiver um vídeo novo, uma entrevista inédita e exclusiva, você seja avisado. Marque também, faça o seu comentário e também não se esqueça de compartilhar o canal e dar o seu like em todos os nossos vídeos. Um abraço e até a próxima.